Hello there. This is Jason Hand, DevOps Evangelist for VictorOps. Really excited to be here with you today on this wonderful Monday. It's a great Monday morning here in Boulder, Colorado. And today's webinar is going to be on the subject of ChatOps, and specifically how ChatOps has become this new interface for a lot of the things that we're doing within the realm of DevOps. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started here. Also, if you happen to have any questions throughout the course of this webinar, you'll see a button in the upper part of your screen where you can enter in your questions. And go ahead and at any point put those questions in there. And once we get through all the slides in this presentation, we'll go ahead and take a look at those questions, and I'll answer those as best as possible. If you happen to think of anything afterwards or during the talk, but you'd like to just hold off and get with me later, you can send an email to jason@victorops.com or send something to me through Twitter. I'm just @JasonHand, and we can have the conversation there. So anyway, let's get started. So as I said, I'm Jason Hand. I'm the DevOps Evangelist for VictorOps. And VictorOps is a service for on-call teams. We provide on-call management, incident management. And ChatOps seems like it's a perfect type of behavior and perfect type of thing that you can use when it comes to incident management, which is the exact reason why I chose to write a book on ChatOps. I give a lot of talks on ChatOps, and here we are today in this webinar discussing this subject. So that's sort of why I like to talk about it. It makes perfect sense with incident management, and we'll touch on that a little bit more as we get into some examples later on in the slides. So there's this idea that continuous delivery is sort of what we're all after. In a lot of cases, folks tend to use interchangeably the idea of DevOps and continuous delivery. And for sure, those who have reached a point where they can do some sort of continuous delivery, it's fair to say that not only have they adopted and gotten really good at their agile development, but also the ideas of DevOps. But I'll argue that continuous delivery isn't really the goal so much as continuous improvement is the goal. And ideas like continuous delivery, continuous deployments, continuous integration, those types of things are going to be byproducts of simply aiming towards and focusing on the idea of just being focused on continuous improvement. And a lot of this has become somewhat, I guess, common sense for a lot of teams, but they really didn't look at it in terms of continuous improvement. They really do focus on the idea of what can we automate, how can we get to this level of continuous integration and deployment, and then be able to just deliver our software at will, which is certainly something that a lot of teams should keep in mind. But again, I argue that continuous improvement is far better to be your sort of North Star or your guiding light. And so keep that in mind as we begin to go through this presentation, and maybe some of this will make a little bit more sense as we go through it. There's a gentleman over at Pivotal named Michael Cote who gives a number of great talks, and one of his talks illustrates the fact that there's a lot of unicorns out there. And when we say unicorns, we're talking about Etsy and Netflix and Twitter and Amazon and all these companies who have somehow reached this level of software development that they can actually develop and then test and put out their software in this sort of continuous manner. And so we've always strived to be to be a unicorn. But the fact is that most of us are actually some sort of lesser, I guess, beast of burden, where we're something more like a really, really great horse, or even we're just a donkey with a carrot on our head, pretending or striving to be a unicorn. And that's okay. That's what most of us are going to start off as, and that's totally fine. And that's something that we should all actually keep in mind, that the unicorns out there, they sort of set the bar and they teach us a lot of things, but we don't all have to be unicorns. For those of you who have never really been either to a conference or have listened to a DevOps talk, I thought I would at least include this idea of CAMs. There's this great model out there that was developed by John Willis and Damon Edwards from the DevOps Cafe podcast. And it's simply the idea of we're creating a culture of automation, measurement, and sharing. And so I thought it was important to sort of give a brief teaser or a brief intro on this whole idea for the audience, just to get you kind of warmed up to what we're talking about in terms of DevOps and how ChatOps relates to all that. So let's talk about that in a little bit more detail. And most of this is all designed to just shorten the release cycles. So the quicker that we can get our software developed and then tested and moved through all of the different phases of the release cycle, the shorter it takes for us to get feedback. And that's feedback that we're going to get from our monitoring and our metrics and our anomaly detection services. It's feedback that we're going to get from our end users. Any kind of feedback that we can get quicker is going to help us in the long run to developing and then delivering our software to our end users. So this idea of shortening the feedback loop and retrieving and getting that feedback to the developers as quickly as possible so that they can make short incremental changes is something that we should strive to do. And that's where this whole idea of continuous improvement comes in. If you make an effort towards the improvement side of things so we can improve the feedback loop, shorten that cycle, all of the other things will become a lot more attainable, and we'll actually be able to get to that part or get to that idea of continuous delivery. So that kind of leads us into this whole thing of, well, this idea of ChatOps being this new interface for DevOps. And when I say that, what I mean is there are all these great services, there's all these great frameworks, there's all kinds of really, really cool ideas that all fall within DevOps. And if you are someone who is trying to find a really efficient way to do this, being able to move a lot of conversations, move your interactions with these different services all to a group chat, that's going to actually speed things up. And we've seen that time and time again with both unicorns and donkeys, where they're beginning to move their interactions and their conversations into group chat, making the group chat simply the interface for all of these different services that they're using. And that in and of itself is ChatOps. So when I say group chat, I'm talking about services like Atlassian's HipChat or Slack or Campfire, FlowDoc, even IRC. There's a lot of great group chat services out there that provide exactly what you need in order to do this stuff. Now, what won't work is something like Gmail's GChat or Link or something where it's really designed for just small group communication, maybe one or two people, or you pull in a few others here and there. That, you can still do some things, but you're not going to be able to leverage the true power of ChatOps if you're not doing it in a group chat environment. So that's what I want to kind of make sure that you understand is when I say group chat, I'm really talking about the larger enterprise group tools that are out there, group chat tools that is, like HipChat, like Slack. Obviously, those are two of the more popular ones out there, but there's a number of other ones that are really great. I think FlowDoc has got some really cool features. Campfire's been around for a long time. And honestly, there's a lot of teams out there, like Etsy, in fact, who use IRC internally to do a lot of their ChatOps and a lot of their internal efforts. One of the great things about the more modern group chat services like Slack and HipChat is that they've got all these really awesome native integrations. If you go into the settings section of any of these modern group chat tools, you'll see that there's all kinds of services that have teamed up with HipChat and Slack to provide this native functionality. So you can go in and you can just check off a few of the services through the integrations page and say, here's a service that I use, I want to go ahead and get that integration going. And here's another service that I use, I want to get that integration going. And once you've gone in and you've made those connections, you've turned on those third-party services, suddenly there's going to be this flood of information, very useful information, just automatically flowing into your group chat that all of the different teams within your company, all of the different members within your teams are going to be able to leverage, providing them all kinds of great information. So let's take a look at some of the more popular native integrations that some of the group chat tools are providing. The first one is probably one of the more obvious ones and most widely used ones, and this idea that there's GitHub out there, who was one of the ones early on doing this whole thing that we call ChatOps, and in fact, they're the ones who coined the term, and I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. But the ability to push out your code, deploy your code out to GitHub, and then have the native integration of GitHub and let's just say HipChat automatically echo back into your room or your engineers, that's going to be a really, really powerful connection point so that you don't have to take the time to not only push your code out and deploy code to GitHub, but then take the time to educate your team that that took place and what the results were. Now through this automation, it's all just going to take place after you go ahead and take the action of deploying your code or pushing your code out there. So, you know, we talk about the CAMS model, and automation is a big part of that. And you'll see that this is what's taking place now. Once you've connected those third-party integrations, when you start to take action with the service you're using, and it automatically posts the results and echoes back information to your team within group chat, that is a level of automation that's very easy to implement and can provide a lot of value to your team. There's a service out there called Travis. I know a lot of people use Travis. It's great for continuous integration. It works very similar to how Jenkins works. But just like GitHub, you go in and you just say, hey, I use Travis for our continuous integration efforts, and I would like for anything that takes place within our Travis configuration or within our Travis instance and all the things that happen within Travis, I want to make sure that that echoes back into group chat as well to make sure that our team is up to date on what's happening. So Travis is another one that's very popular. And then one that we use here within VictorOps is called Raygun, and this is great for our front-end developers to get immediate feedback on whatever Raygun has detected. It can immediately pump that back into our group chat for our front-end developers to get that information immediately rather than them having to go on their own, go dig into different services such as Raygun and find out what's going on. So that's a couple of examples of some services that are just native integrations in a lot of these tools, these group chat tools, that today you could go in and just configure these settings, configure the settings of your group chat so that these services will immediately start pumping information into group chat for you and your team to all have this level of situational awareness that you didn't have prior. Now, one of the really cool and interesting parts about ChatOps is that there's this idea that you can leverage applications that they've been known as bots, but they're just an application. And you can go out there and say, well, I want to leverage the power of an application that we're calling a bot so that it can do more for me. Some of these third-party integrations are great, but when you start implementing a bot that can actually go in and do custom scripts and do a lot of the heavy lifting for you, it kind of takes you to a new level within ChatOps that previously you wouldn't have had. And so let's talk about some of the more popular bots that are out there. By far, the most popular bot, and the one that's been around the longest, is called Hubot. And Hubot is simply just a Node.js application. It was originally developed by the team over at GitHub a number of years ago. They eventually open sourced it and made it available to the public to then start committing to it and enhancing it and just making it the bot that it is today, which for sure is one of the most widely used bots out there. There's a lot of great scripts. They're just copy scripts that people are writing and providing to the community that they can then adopt and use or modify to use within their own environments. Hubot is one of the more popular ones, and if you're just now getting into this whole idea of ChatOps and you want to explore the ability to leverage a bot, if you're familiar with CoffeeScript, which is just a sort of a derivative of JavaScript, I would encourage you to look into Hubot. But there's some other great ones out there as well. Lida is the leading Ruby bot out there. And if you're familiar with Ruby and you like to write your code in Ruby, the Ruby gem is where you would be writing the instructions on what you want this bot to do. And it works much like Hubot does. You just write your Ruby gem that has all of the different instructions on what it is you'd like to do, leveraging all the different services that are out there via their APIs. And then you can ask your bot to do stuff for you from within group chat, and it's going to not only take that action for you, but then echo in the results of what took place for you to have that feedback, that immediate feedback. So Lida is another one out there. If you're really more of a Ruby developer or you just think that Ruby might be something that's a little bit easier for your team to adopt, you might want to look into Lida, which I personally love Lida. It's a really great bot. Then the other one out there, this one's actually pronounced R2. And it's a Python bot. So if you're more of a Python developer or your team is more of a Python shop, I would encourage you to look into R2. This one has had a lot of great commits to it lately. The people that work on this bot, the community is starting to grow a lot here lately, so it's really cool to see some of the new things that R2 is now able to provide out there, and it's great to see some traction for this bot to become a lot more popular out there and a little bit more mainstream within the ChatOps world. Those are the three big bots that you'll find out there. Now, there's a number of others out that people are starting to develop and make available. And if you just do a search on GitHub, you'll probably find a handful of other bots that you can use out there. But these are the three that have been around sort of the longest, that most of the teams that I interact with and that VictorOps interacts with, these are the ones that they're using. But it doesn't mean that those are the only ones out there. Another cool thing that we've discovered here when it comes to ChatOps is that not only can you use the native integrations, but you can use also the services that are called API as a service. And so between the bots and the native integrations, you can come in here and you can use services like If and Zapier so that you can leverage their service to also have all kinds of great functionality. And I'll show you one of the ones that we've done here internally at VictorOps, leveraging Zapier and Salesforce to be able to bring in really valuable information from our Salesforce system and provide that into group chat for our account managers and our sales team to be able to have, again, that group knowledge, that situational awareness, which once you've done that and you've been able to bring in a lot of your non-technical teams and provide value for them, you're going to see all kinds of really great traction within your ChatOps efforts. I'll show you some examples about that in just a little bit. I kind of touched on this already, but much of what this whole idea of ChatOps is actually bringing to the table and bringing to your team is this idea of situational awareness. And this is something that you'll hear a lot within the DevOps community, because situational awareness is one way to allow for your teams to all of a sudden have greater impact on not only what they're doing and what they know, but also what's going on, or I'm sorry, what they do and what they know within their own little group, but also what's going on in other groups. So within the DevOps sort of movement, as they say, there's this idea of knocking down silos and tearing down walls, and sometimes it's a little bit hard to figure out what's the best way to do that. Certainly group chat and this whole idea of ChatOps is a great way to leverage what is out there in terms of the interesting services and tools that we use to build on this situational awareness. By bringing people into the fold and having different conversations about what's taking place, those walls and those silos will just begin to dissolve because more and more people are able to be part of the conversation and know what's going on. A lot of that is really designed to help build on this idea of empathy. You'll hear a lot of people talking about empathy within the DevOps space, and there's a good reason. It's because we want to tear down those silos and knock down those walls and get it so that everybody on our team is actually working to understand more about what goes on outside of their own little world. And empathy can help drive that. When all of a sudden your developers can be a little bit more empathetic to your operations team or to your support team, they're actually going to be invested a little bit more, and they have that ability to understand more of what's going on and what's taking place outside of their bubble, and vice versa. You know, you have your operations team that really understand and truly understand the struggles of the development team and your engineers. Suddenly, those walls and those silos will just begin to dissolve. And you'll see that your team starts to build on this tribal knowledge. There's no more single point of failure. All of a sudden, people are starting to become more efficient because they actually have visibility on what's taking place, not only throughout their team, but throughout their company as well. All throughout 2015, I've been to quite a few DevOps days around the country. I hosted the one here in Denver, DevOps Days Rockies. I just got back yesterday from Silicon Valley from their DevOps Days. One of the things that you hear a lot is this idea of situational awareness and creating tribal knowledge. And earlier this year, I was up in Minneapolis for their DevOps Days, and Mary and Tom Poppendick, who are two really well-known advocates for DevOps within the space, authors of this very popular book called The Lean Software Development. But Mary was giving a talk in Minneapolis, and she had this really great illustration that I thought I would share with you. If you can see it in this screen, in this slide, there's an image here of a soccer field, and you can kind of see that there's a little stick figure here, or a bunch of stick figures here sort of kicking the ball around. And what she was talking about in this talk is that all of the great teams, if you're going to start talking about sports and metaphors there, all of the great teams have really, really great situational awareness. They know where all of their teammates are on the field or on the court. They know where the ball is. They know where the ball is headed. They just have a greater level of awareness. And those are the teams that are successful. And I thought that was a really, really great point, and I wanted to illustrate that as well, that it's the same thing that you see in sports that we're trying to apply now to the tech field. The more you know about what's taking place across things all over the field, you're going to be able to actually take action and make an impact much more efficiently than previously otherwise. I like to show this VMware image when I'm giving this talk because I think this perfectly illustrates the world that we sort of live in now. We consume and ingest a lot of our information through social media and through different timelines from different services and tickers, and all kinds of just information is just simply fed to us, and it's real easy to know what's going on really without making too much of an effort to go out and obtain that information. It's just sort of fed to us. And so through this picture here, I thought that depicts a great example of that, where a lot of times we just simply know information before other people because it's simply fed to us through these different channels. And a lot of that has to do with ChatOps. When you can make it so that your different services and the tools that you use are feeding you information without you having to really lift a finger, that's going to really help you with boosting your efficiency and getting your software out there. We see this all over the place too, right? All of our social media is provided through us through timelines. I know every morning when I wake up, I spend a good 5 to 10 minutes just scrolling through a number of different apps and services, just sort of getting caught up on what took place. And timelines is just something that you're seeing show up all kinds of places. I mean, even the VictorOps interface is designed with the idea of a timeline so that you can get situational awareness and know what's taking place within your infrastructure and code base, and what kinds of problems have come up, and who needs to be able to react to that and give them a space to actually converse over that and collaborate. That's exactly what VictorOps set out to design, was a timeline where people can do that. Let's talk real quickly just on the origins of ChatOps. I touched base earlier that this was something that came out of GitHub back in late 2011, 2012. Jesse Newland, Mark Imbriaco, and their whole team came up with this idea. And this quote from Jesse is one of my favorite quotes. If you search for YouTube, you're likely to find the video where this came from, but he's totally right. Placing tools right in the middle of the conversation is pretty much, in a nutshell, what ChatOps is all about. We're just going to take all of the different tools that we use, and we're going to move it into the conversations where we're having these. And that's what I mean by ChatOps being the new interface of DevOps. All of the different actions and the tools that we use to attain this ability to leverage our tools and push our software out there and test it and get it ready to deliver to our end users is all taking place now in a lot of teams, all through within Chat. Really quickly, I'm going to go through some really interesting use cases and ways that you can be using it. Now, I don't want you to get too hung up on the syntax that I'll display here, because a lot of it is going to be specific to what we do here within VictorOps. But more so, just pay attention to the actual use cases and things that you could be doing with your teams, both technical and non. Now, we already touched on the ability to deploy code using services like GitHub. And so this is sort of what that would look like. I could hop into my group chat and simply do a normal command to actually push my code out, but I'm actually talking to my bot when I do this, and the bot's going to go out there and do that action for me and then echo the results back into group chat for not only me to understand what took place, but my entire team. Another thing that we can do, we already kind of touched on this with Travis, but let's look at it when we're doing something with Jenkins, but we're going to do our infrastructure builds much in the same way. Now I'm going to have this conversation basically with my bot that says, I want to commit this build, and I tell the bot exactly what I want to do, and it takes action for me. Now, I could go into my Jenkins interface through the web browser and do all of the same things and then hop over into group chat and say, here's what took place, but by being able to do it from within an area within group chat, not only am I accomplishing the same thing and getting the same feedback, but I'm sharing it with my team. And I'm also teaching others on my team how to do this type of stuff. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later when we get into the benefits of this idea of ChatOps. One thing that we also, or that we obviously find very interesting is the ability to manage incidents. So VictorOps being an incident management platform and tool for teams to go in and deal with outages and deal with problems and understand and swarm to the issue, having the ability to do that from within group chat makes perfect sense. And that's a big reason why we at VictorOps talk about ChatOps quite a bit. So the ability to go into your Slack or HipChat and actually talk about and acknowledge and take action on all the different incidents and things that are coming up within VictorOps is going to be a huge win for your team, especially when you know something's broken and you really need to get that resolved so that your users are able to use your service again. That's going to be a huge win for your team. Some of the non-technical stuff is actually my favorite stuff to talk about, because this is where you start to see real traction within your teams outside of the technical space, because it makes a lot of sense for your tech teams to go in there and have conversations about what's going on with the infrastructure and the code, but you still have these sort of artificial silos because the sales team, the marketing team, support team, and others, they don't really have as much value in group chat unless there's going to be something in there for them to use. And so one of the things that we've done here at VictorOps, I touched on this a little bit earlier when we were talking about Zapier, is we have the ability to now echo in information straight into our group chat tool whenever something within Salesforce changes. Previously, our sales team would have to log into Salesforce and run either a report or go look at dashboards multiple times throughout the day to sort of understand what's taking place within our systems, within our Salesforce data. But now, as soon as something changes that we're interested in within Salesforce, it's immediately going to echo into our group chat. And that's been huge with our teams. Marketing, much the same way. We like to develop a lot of our projects and manage our projects through this really great service called Trello. And you can do all that through the Trello interface. In fact, I love the Trello interface. The drag and drop stuff is great. But if I wanted to, I could do much of the same stuff all from within group as well. And that just gives me one single interface to sort of interact with all of the tools that I'm using. And it gives more visibility to the other teams on what's taking place. Support, this is one of the first places that we actually started implementing ChatOps efforts. Now, instead of our support team going in through the command line and extending trials for our users, we can actually just do that through group chat by leveraging our bot. And our bot will go out and do that for us and then come back and let us know that it took place. Also, we can go in and we can restart services. Just like I would from a command line, I can do that from within group chat now, and I accomplish the same thing, but I also teach my team how it was done and you know, what the results were. Then we start getting into this idea of self-healing bots, where you can leverage tools and features such as the transmogrifier within VictorOps to actually let your bot recognize that there's a problem and take action for you, which has been a really, really cool thing. So here's an example of that. An incident's been created. It detects that Apache has been offline. Well, our bot can see that, you know, this happened, and the very first step to fix this is just to go in and restart Apache. So rather than page Jason, whoever may be on call, we can go in and just let the bot take action immediately. And if that for some reason didn't work, then you can go ahead and move forward with paging whoever may be on call for that. This is another great quote from James Fryman, who wrote the foreword on the book that I did on ChatOps. We're taking the things we're already doing and putting them in line with the conversations that we're already having, which I think is exactly what's taking place here. Real quickly, because we're getting short on time and I don't want to run out of time here, let's talk about some of the benefits. Sharing, we've already kind of talked about that. It seems really obvious, I'm sure to you, that by the fact that we're sharing a lot more information, our team's going to have a lot more leverage information to make decisions and also know more about what's taking place throughout the entire company. We're going to speed things up by moving things into chat. Now we're going to be able to do things a lot quicker. Things we can now, because we are sharing so much more, we're learning at a higher rate about how things get done within our infrastructure and our code and just throughout our business in general. And it's a lot more secure. You know, the bot can only do so many things, and if it's not been hard-coded as something the bot knows how to do, it's a lot less risky than actually sitting down in a command line and taking action from there. I've got a book that you can download. It's for free, jhan.co at jhan.co. Oh, well, I've just been notified that we've got lots of time here, so I was kind of going a little bit fast, which is great because it looks like we've got some questions here. But anyway, I'm not going to just read out this address to you. You can see that there. Just note that the C, the O, and the D in that URL are all capitalized. But if you go to that address, you can download a free copy of the ChatOps for Dummies book. And a lot of what I've been talking about in this webinar is going to be covered in greater length there. And certainly you can send me an email. We can talk more about that after this. Send me an email anytime you'd like, or we can chat on Twitter as well. But I'd love for you to download the ChatOps for Dummies book, give it a read. It's probably maybe a 15, 20-minute read, and then send me an email with your questions. I'd love to hear more, especially for teams that have already started to introduce ChatOps within their organizations. What are some of the things that you've run across? What maybe problems have you had, either implementing a bot or just getting maybe your teams on board with this whole process? It's not always really, really simple. Sometimes it makes perfect sense for distributed teams when we've got other team members around the world or around the country. The whole ChatOps thing actually makes perfect sense for them, but I've definitely had conversations with a lot of folks who have approached me and said, I love the idea of ChatOps, but we all work within one location. And so we have a lot of conversations face to face, and so we're not really able to see the value of ChatOps quite as much. And usually I have, my response to them is VictorOps works all within one area as well, and here's why it makes sense to do it still, even though we're all under one roof. And so I'd love to hear some feedback from you and what it's looked like for you to either implement ChatOps or at least talk about it internally, and what kind of either pushback or success have you had while implementing ChatOps. So with that, I know we've got some extra time here, but we can go into our questions. And then, so if you've thought of any other questions throughout the course of this, now's the time to ask those. We do have a couple of them here that I'm going to go through in just a moment. But I will say thank you so much for taking the time to join me in this webinar. I genuinely love talking about ChatOps. It's something that I started finding, or I started sort of looking into about 1.5 years ago, right when I came on to VictorOps. And I was right off the bat just sort of fascinated by this whole idea that we can take a lot of the things that we already do in terms of our habits. And what I mean by that is there's definitely been a movement to move away from using email internally. And so if you think about it, over the years, we've actually started moving away from email and started chatting internally. And the reason is that people historically were just sort of using email as chat. So if you think about an example of me having a question for somebody else within my team, traditionally I would just send them an email and say, hey, do you know the answer to this? And then they would respond back, likely with just one single sentence, giving me the answer that I wanted. And then I would respond back and say, thank you, or maybe I would realize that there might be somebody else who would be interested in this conversation, or we want some extra context. And so we would then CC someone else on that email, and all of a sudden we've got several people part of this long email thread. And all essentially what we were doing with that is really just having this chat conversation, except that it was taking longer to get that conversation in front of people and then actually somehow have a wrap-up of the conversation. So more and more you're seeing teams actually move away from internal email and move to things like group chat. And again, I don't mean GChat, I don't mean Skype, although I know that there's still use cases for those. I would encourage you to move all those conversations into group chat. And then I'll also add one extra thing. Some of these more modern group chat tools do offer the ability to have direct messages with other people. I would encourage you to stop and think before you send someone on your team a direct message, is this message to them, is this conversation that we're about to have private or sensitive or somehow a secret type of conversation that we don't want others to be a part of? Because if the answer is no, I would encourage you to move that conversation out into a group room so that others can take value in that conversation and get extra context, or maybe even provide extra context to the conversation. If you think about, I may have a question for someone, and I have an idea of who may be able to answer that question for me. If I just talk to them in a direct message rather than in a group environment where others can see, I have just now siloed that conversation. And so whatever answers I get, nobody else gets to take value from those answers. And then also, there may be other people who have information that can provide value to that conversation as well, but they weren't aware that a conversation was even taking place because it was all done through a direct message. So I'm definitely advocating for you, and it's something I'm hoping that our team here at VictorOps will begin doing better as well, is that we stop and we think about the conversation we're about to have in a direct message and see if it really, really does make sense for it to be a direct message rather than in the group. Because a lot of this is really just, we want to create extra context. We want to make sure that everybody is aware of the same stuff. We're trying to create that thing we call situational awareness. And if we can take efforts to avoid these artificial siloed conversations, that's actually going to speed up and create traction for our teams to not only have that situational awareness, but then streamline their efforts with whatever it is that they're working on. And of course, all of this is aimed towards being able to deliver our software quicker and provide greater value to our business. So with that, let's go ahead and move on into the questions. So let me pull up our questions here. All right, one of our questions is, what group chat tools are supported? We touched on a few of them. So Atlassian's HipChat is one that's very popular, and I know that they're just about to, I think, release a new version of their HipChat tool. And the HipChat one has been around for a number of years. It's very popular within the software development space. A lot of the teams out there who have really adopted this whole thing called DevOps have moved their conversations into HipChat, and I highly recommend that if you're just looking for some place to start. Of course, another one out there that a lot of teams love is called Slack. And so Slack is something that's really, really great. It has a really, really smooth interface and a great user experience. It has all kinds of great native integrations. Some of the other ones that are out there, there's a service called FlowDoc, which was part of the Rally software package, or it was acquired by Rally Software, and then here recently in the past few months, Rally was then acquired by CA, but FlowDoc is still out there running independently, and it's a great service. It's got some really, really interesting tools that help you really thread your conversations and bring sort of disparate conversations all back together so that you can understand the context of where the statement was made and in what context was it actually talking about. So those are the group chat tools that I would recommend out there. There's also Campfire and another number of others. But I would avoid things like GChat and Skype and Link and those kinds of things because they don't really allow for the group chat environment that we're after. There's a question of, are the slides or the notes going to be made available? Yes, they will be. Actually, if you go to jasonhands.com, you'll see over on the right there's a menu bar, and you can go into there and you'll see a list of all the talks that I have, and these slides are going to be available within there. I'll also tweet out the slides so that you can find them there as well. So if you're on Twitter, just look for that. Just follow me on Twitter at JasonHand, and you'll see something here this afternoon about that. But yes, the slides will be made available. There's the question of what Slack version will work with ChatOps versus, specifically the free version versus the standard version. When it comes to Slack, the free version will work just fine. The difference between the free version and the paid version of Slack is simply just the ability to actually keep history on all of your different messages. And also there is a limitation to how many integrations you can turn on. I want to say the last time I looked at it, it was something like 5 integrations. So if you have only maybe the need to turn on a handful of services so that those are echoing back into group chat, you can certainly leverage the free version. But if you want to be able to keep more than, I think it's like 10,000 messages historically from Slack, or you want to use more than 5 or so tools to integrate into Slack, you may have to actually step up and use the paid version of Slack. What else do we have in here? Let me read through some of these. One of them says, if you're using group chat tools, is it searchable? What history backlog is saved for it to be searchable? Can this data be captured into a knowledge base? Yes. So a lot of these group chat tools, they do have the search feature, and you can go in and you can say, well, you know, I remember someone talking about this topic a couple of weeks ago, but I don't really want to scroll back through here and see if I can find the conversation. So You can use search, and it will provide you with results on whatever it is you're searching for. Now, I will say my own personal preference is that, especially when your teams get to where they're having a lot of conversations within your group chat, sometimes the search results that you get are going to be not all that great. They don't really have the algorithms in there to provide you with the best search results, like Google would. It's just going to provide you with every time that phrase or that word was mentioned. And I still find that I'm oftentimes still seeking through the search results for the exact thing that I want. And so what I've found to be actually more useful than using search within group chat is I'll go ahead and ask a question again within a group chat, room or channel. And so let's say I'm curious to know, when is the next webinar that I'm giving? And I know that somebody already gave me that answer a couple of weeks ago. Rather than me taking the time to search for it, I'm just going to pose that question in the group chat room again. And I'm hoping that someone on my team has an answer for me, and they'll give me that answer. But as a result, or as a byproduct, they're also going to give that answer and that information to other people on my team. So that's sort of just a behavior that I like that helps me sort of encourage more conversations. Of course, we want this ability to search, and I think over time, some of the search tools that are built into things like HipChat and Slack are going to get better because more and more people are going to need that type of functionality. But my own personal preference right now is to actually just pose the question again and let someone on my team help me understand the answer. There's another great question in here that says, how do you convince management that ChatOps is valuable for achieving business objectives? Well, this one's a tough one, and this doesn't speak to just the idea of ChatOps. You can replace the word ChatOps and with the word DevOps, and I hear the same question all the time. It's how do we make the case to our management level that taking this type of action is actually going to be able to provide value to the business? Well, the best thing that you can do is measure. One of the big things that we talk about within the DevOps community is measuring, and metrics is a huge piece of that. Now, how that looks like for you in terms of measuring ChatOps, that may be a little bit difficult. What I would encourage you to do is actually measure things like how quickly are we now able to resolve tickets, or how quickly are we able to get feedback from our monitoring information or services like VictorOps so that we can actually resolve incidents quicker. So the point of it, or what I'm trying to get to here, is that if you can measure other things outside of just this idea of ChatOps, you'll see that by moving the tools and services we use into chat, you're now creating this situation where people know things quicker, and so they can react to things quicker. We talked about early on in this presentation about we're just trying to shorten the feedback loop so that we can actually get that information back quickly, make whatever efforts we need to either improve on our service or improve on our code or our architecture and infrastructure. We want to be able to get that information to the developers or to our ops teams quicker so that they can push out improvement. And if we can measure those improvements over time, you can directly relate that back to the fact that we're now able to, in a very highly efficient way, swarm on incidents or swarm on different problems and conversations that are taking place within our company. And because we can all have these conversations much quicker in a group environment where everybody gets to get the exact same value out of it, you will see all kinds of efficiencies across the board. But you need to be able to measure those efficiencies. So things like measuring the mean time to acknowledge or the mean time to repair an incident, how quickly are you now able to push out bug fixes? Those types of things are what I would encourage you to measure and then take back to your management and say, by moving to this more ChatOps approach, now we're seeing benefits here and here and here. So hopefully that answers your question. If not, send me an email. I'd love to talk more about that. I can point you to some other teams who have had these same types of conversations with their management. I was out in San Francisco for the DevOps Enterprise Summit a couple of weeks ago, and the team from HP, they've gone all in. They have totally doubled down on this idea of ChatOps, and maybe we can get in touch with them and see if they can give us some more feedback of how they sold it to their management, that this is the way we should be sort of doing our work from here on. Somebody just mentioned to me that Slack has bumped their free integrations up to 10. So I said that it was a limit of 5. It sounds like that's up to 10 now. So that could be very useful for you. Someone asked here, which bot would be best to use with Amazon Web Services? Honestly, it shouldn't matter. It's not going to matter in terms of what environment you deploy your architecture in. The bots are typically going to reside internal to your own infrastructure or internal to your network. You want those bots to be on the inside of your VPN so that they can actually access the services. And those bots are simply, they're just going to, in most cases, SSH into a box and take action for you, or they're going to leverage an existing API to a service. So really, they're completely agnostic. It doesn't really matter in terms of, what cloud you may be using, if that's Cloud Foundry or AWS or Rackspace or whatever. It really doesn't matter. So I would say when you're looking at what bot to use, I would say or encourage you to really just think about the type of code that your team is more interested in writing in. So if that's going to be Ruby, I would suggest Lita. If Python is sort of more your thing, R2 is great for that. And then the teams out there who are more JavaScript and CoffeeScript focused, Qbot is probably a good place to start as well. And also Qbot has a lot of great scripts that the community has built and provided out there. So it's a good place to start if you're just sort of don't care. I would say Qbot is probably where I would point you. We say here, there's another question or statement that says, to the point of replacing email with chat, how do you preserve conversations for reprint and or archives? Some conversations will have information that need to be saved in a CRM, customer relationship management, or archive. This is a great point. There is the ability for you to export a lot of your conversations out of group chat and into email. I know that there's still, in a lot of industries out there and a lot of businesses, they need to archive this stuff. And if you're using a service like Slack or HipChat, they will maintain that information for you for, I'm not sure the actual details on how long they maintain that. But all of that's going to be available for you to then go in and find and reprint or make available whenever and however you may need. So I don't think that there should be really anything that's getting in the way. If you think about the context of, I know I had an email conversation. There was this really long thread about something I had with my team a couple of months ago, and I need to retrieve that and maybe possibly print that out or do something with it. The same thing applies to group chat. So I can either go into email and search my inbox for that conversation, or I can go into group chat and see if I can either search for it and find it or ask my team about that. Honestly, that's not something I see very often these days. In fact, there's a lot of companies out there who are not allowed to keep a lot of these conversations for different compliance reasons. But I'm not sure if that's really a great answer for you. So if you'd like, send me an email, jason@victorops.com, and we can talk more about that. And I can see if I can connect you with some teams who have seen this type of problem, or not problem, but have run into this before, and see if they've got some answers that we can share with not only you, but other people out there who are interested in sort of adopting ChatOps, but want to know how can we go in and we can capture those conversations and make sure that they're not lost forever. Okay, I think that looks like it's all for the questions. Actually, let me double check here. Maybe we've got one more. Nope. Oh, wait. Yep, we're good. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and say thank you again. It's been a pleasure to spend this Monday afternoon or Monday morning with you, depending on where you are. If you have any questions at all, send me an email, just jason@victorops.com. I also encourage you, if you're on Twitter and you have questions, send me a message on Twitter. And the reason for that is that it sort of speaks to this whole idea of let's not black box or silo our conversations. So if you have a thought about ChatOps or a question of it, or a question about it, by asking that question out into the Twitter sphere, I can respond to that answer and hopefully give you the value and give you the information you're looking for, but we're providing value to everybody else who's paying attention as well. And that's a big, big part and key tenet of DevOps is the idea of sharing. And so although it's perfectly fine for you to send me an email, I think there are others out there who are going to find value in the answer and would love to be a part of that conversation. So if we can move that conversation out into an open area where others can be a part of that conversation, that's going to be really great in sort of getting us in the habit of moving conversations into group chat, into an area where others can be a part of that conversation and they can provide context and value, and they can get context and value out of it. And that's going to speed up this whole process and this whole effort towards DevOps and ultimately continuous improvement, and for a lot of teams, continuous delivery. So thank you very much. And again, reach out if you have any questions. I'll probably be doing another webinar either in December or January, so stay tuned for more information on that. And send me messages on Twitter and on Facebook. Visit victorops.com/blog for a lot of other great content on ChatOps and some of the other things that I touched on here. You can also go to jasonhand.com. I try to keep some blogs and some of my talks updated there, so hopefully there's some more information there that'll be of value to you. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this webcast. It's been great, and I hope to hear from a lot of you moving forward. Enjoy your Monday and the rest of your week, and we'll talk to you again real soon. Thanks.